Luka Dončić is a Laker. Never thought I'd say those words. We're going to look at how he changes the game for LA. Then what can we expect from the Mavs? How about Ramadan Kyrie? And can AD actually help Dallas win the title? Then I have 3 top performers, one with a special milestone and 2 big games from some young players. Y'all ready? Let's go. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Control Room. I'm your host, Esrael Johannes. Now, am I still mad about the Luka Dončić trade? You bet I am. And not only am I mad at Nico Harrison, I'm still mad at Patrick Dumont. I'm still mad at the entire front office. And I think Luka Dončić is too, because he came out with a vengeance. If you saw his last 2 games, which I'm sure everybody did, he is starting to feel like the Luka Dončić of old. So let's look at his last 2 games against Denver and Dallas. Starting with Saturday's game at Denver, Luka scored 32 points on 10 of 22 shooting, 45.5%. 4 of 9 from 3, 44.4%. A perfect 8 of 8 from the free throw line, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals, 1 block, only 1 turnover, didn't even commit a foul, and played 30 minutes and 38 seconds. This was his first 30-point game since December 15th at Golden State and his 11th 30-point game this season. He also tied his second most steals in his career and tied a season high for the 5th time. And he also picked up a technical foul at the end of the first half, which only meant one thing: Luka Dončić was back. And then Tuesday against Dallas, he scored 19 points on 6 of 17 shooting, only 35.3%, 1 of 7 from 3, 14.3%, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, but grabbed 15 rebounds, dished 12 assists, had 3 steals, and 2 blocks. 19 points, 15 rebounds, 12 assists. He became the 3rd player ever with a triple-double against every team in the NBA, along with LeBron James and Russell Westbrook. That is the person, that is the player that the Dallas Mavericks, specifically Nico Harrison and Patrick Dumont, traded away. They let go of this guy. So, what does Luka change for the Lakers? His dribble penetration leads to chaos, right? If he's able to drive in a way that collapses defenses, have defenders in the paint. The Mavericks try to load up in the paint because that is one of the Lakers' strengths. They love to score in the paint. So they force you to shoot from outside. Well, what does Luka do best? He's going to pass behind his head, pass behind his back, pass to guys to the side. He's going to kick out to whoever is open because somebody will always be open and he's going to know exactly where they are. So that leads to open threes. And if they decide to drop, easy floaters and drop coverage, lobs to bigs, to LeBron, to Jackson Hayes, etc., etc. And then on the fast break, his advanced passes. In Dallas, we've seen it all the time. If you have somebody who's able to receive the pass, Luka's going to make the pass. He's like a quarterback. That's that Luka magic that all of us in Dallas got used to since he was drafted in 2018. And now the Lakers are getting a front row seat to all that, night in and night out. Now, how is this production tracked? There is a stat for it, and it can be called different things, but I tend to refer to it as points created. More often, you'll see it called points scored plus assisted. So, what are the most points created in NBA history in a season? Did you know Luka Dončić was at the top of that leaderboard? Look at this. Luka Dončić last season with Dallas averaged 57.2 points created, which was the most in NBA history. Now, this can only be tracked in the play-by-play era, so since 1996-97. But it's still the highest number in NBA history. Behind him, James Harden in 2016-2017 with Houston at 56. Russell Westbrook, the same season with OKC at 54.9 in third. And then in fourth was James Harden again in 2018-2019 with Houston at 53.9. And in fifth is Nikola Jokic right now with the Denver Nuggets at 53.3. Luka this season is averaging 44.9 points created per game, which is still the 7th most among all players in 2024-25. Also, Luka is 3rd with 3 seasons of 50-plus points created, and James Harden is the one that leads the way with 4. Trae Young, if you include this season, also has 4, but Luka's right behind them with 3. So that's the dynamic playmaker that the Lakers were just handed. And you wonder why everyone in Dallas is irate, because we had this guy and it didn't have to get rid of him. So Luka led the charge against Denver, and they struck gold. Why? Because they had 4 20-point scores for the first time all season. The Lakers did. So Luka led the way with 32 points on 10 of 22 shooting. LeBron followed that up with 25 points on 11 of 19 shooting. Austin Reeves added 23 points on 7 of 13 shooting. And Rui Hachimura had 21 points on 7 of 12 shooting. Right? First game with 4 20-point scores this season. All 4 of those players combined outscored the Denver Nuggets. That's the Luka Dončić effect. Now, is this sustainable for the Lakers? Because you can't just plug Luka from Dallas into LA and get the same result, right? The team, the makeup of the roster matters as well. Is this sustainable for the Lakers, right? 4 20-point scores is not something that you see every day. It's not something that's going to happen night in and night out. But because of Luka, LA will have opportunities to score the basketball. If it's not Rui, it could be Dorian Finney-Smith, who has played with Luka before in Dallas. Finney-Smith had only 3 points on 1 of 5 shooting, but he was a plus 21 plus minus in that game against Denver, right? That's the best plus minus of any player on the floor, and he was involved in the huge run that pulled away from Denver, where the Lakers were able to build a larger lead over the Nuggets in the first half of the fourth quarter. DFS Dodo was a part of all that, and he played about 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Another thing to keep in mind in that Denver game, of course, these numbers can happen on a game-by-game basis, but not necessarily in a series. Julian Strawther had 5 fouls in his first 3 minutes and 27 seconds of action. That's not normal, and dependent on the refs, the crews that you're going to have, right? Crews led by Tony Brothers, Scott Foster, Zach Zarba. It's not always going to be the same across the board. So how the refs officiate the game is going to matter just as much as to how defenses can play and how you can exploit certain things on the court. But in this specific game, right, there is reason for excitement among the Laker Nation. Now, where do the Lakers still fall short, in my estimation? This season, the Lakers are at a 112.9 defensive rating, which is 13th. 48.2% from the floor, which is 6th. 35.5% from 3, which is 17th. More on that in a moment. 42.4 rebounds per game, which is 26th. 9.3 offensive rebounds per game, which is 27th. 14.6 opponent second chance points per game, which is 19th. Keep in mind, they have had a 106.8 defensive rating since January 19th, which is the best defense in the NBA. But also, again, on that three-point shooting, the Lakers have 24 games this season where they shoot at or below 33.3% from 3. That's the second most among all playoff teams, which is top 6 in both East and West. The only other team with more is Houston with 29, and they are known to not have a great offense, despite having guys like Fred VanVleet and Alperen Şengün. So the three-point shooting is one thing. The other thing you have to look at is the rebounding. Even with Anthony Davis, the Lakers were not one of the best teams on the glass. And now that you don't have AD, rebounding is much harder for a small ball team. This can hurt in matchups against bigger teams. Now, against Dallas, they didn't have that problem, but that's because Dallas's biggest player was Dwight Powell. So it's not going to hurt against small ball teams. But against the bigger teams, the teams that are more likely to go on a deep postseason run like Oklahoma City in the West, and in the East, Boston and Cleveland, it's going to hurt against those kinds of matchups. Maybe not in a 1-game situation, but in a 7-game series, it's going to be a detriment. And this was the kryptonite for Oklahoma City last year. I had said in season 1 of this show that OKC's lack of offensive rebounding, despite their efficient shooting and their lack of generating second chance points, could be a reason that their offense doesn't move as well or doesn't play as well, doesn't score as much in the postseason. And Dallas was able to take advantage of that with their mismatch on the size aspect. Now, for LA, you might not have the rebounding, but you have Luka Dončić, so your offense is already so much better with his ability to go into the paint and score at will. He can score in one-on-one. If you blitz him, he's going to find the open man. He's going to make the right play. If you sit and drop, it's just too easy for him to get those easy floaters. There is almost no situation on defense, if you're trying to defend Luka Dončić, that he won't succeed. Your best opportunity is to blitz. If you heard Mind the Game with JJ Redick and LeBron James, you know that the best defense to play against Luka is to blitz him. And it's still highly efficient compared to plenty of other teams that their primary ball handler gets blitzed. So that is something that we're going to have to see as Luka evolves in this Lakers offense, as the Lakers adjust to him and get more used to his creativity and his offensive production. So that's something that I'm personally excited for when it comes to Luka Dončić. I'm going to hate that it's not going to be for the Dallas Mavericks. Speaking of them, they're up next. What can we look for in the Mavericks now that they don't have Luka Dončić? Including Ramadan Kyrie, and what can we expect from Anthony Davis once he returns? The Dallas Mavericks have won 5 of their last 8, including a road win at Boston. But how formidable are they? I've got some numbers that are showing where they're at in certain categories. In their last 8 games, they have a 114.1 offensive rating, which is 14th. A 114 defensive rating, which is 16th. They shoot 47.2% from the floor, which is 11th. They're at 40.7% from 3, which is the best in the NBA in the last 8 games. They allowed 19.5 second chance points per game, which is last in the league. And they also allow 57.5 paint points per game, which is 29th. Of course, that can be attributed to the fact that the Mavs don't have Anthony Davis or either of their centers in Derek Lively II and Daniel Gafford. So without big men, without guys in the paint that can stretch defenses, that can make it easier for Dallas to score, the Mavs need Kyrie Irving to be superstar Kyrie Irving. He was selected as a 2025 All-Star by Adam Silver to replace Anthony Davis after he got hurt in his debut against Houston. And that was Kyrie's 9th All-Star selection. So we need to see not just All-Star Kyrie, but superstar Kyrie. And some on the internet would dare say maybe Ramadan Kyrie. Now, why have I brought up Ramadan Kyrie all episode? It's because Ramadan actually begins Saturday, March 1st. So I tried to extrapolate Kyrie's numbers excluding Ramadan and during Ramadan to see if there was an actual difference, to see if the legend of Ramadan Kyrie is real. Now, in the last 5 seasons, if you exclude and include Ramadan, excluding Ramadan in the last 5 years, Kyrie Irving scores 25.8 points per game, shoots 48.9% overall, 40.3% from 3, 90.2% from the free throw line, 5.2 assists per game, and 1.2 steals per game. During Ramadan, and this has happened since 2020 through 2024 because Ramadan in 2025 hasn't happened yet, Kyrie is scoring 25.9 points per game on 49% shooting overall, 38.6% from 3, a staggeringly good 94.6% from the free throw line, 6.2 assists per game, and 1.7 steals per game. Now, if you're just looking at these stats nominally, as in just looking at the numbers, you might say Kyrie's not that different outside of Ramadan and during Ramadan. However, if you know anything about Ramadan, you know that it involves fasting. And regardless of a religion that you practice, or if you're just fasting to fast for diet's sake, you'll know that it takes a lot of energy out of you. You can't eat in religious practices. You normally don't eat while the sun is up. And so that can affect your energy. That can affect your physical production if you're an athlete. And so it is a difficult time for athletes as they have to train during the day, and at the same time, they're not able to eat until nighttime, but nighttime is when they play games. So the fact that Kyrie's able to go through this and maintain his numbers is a special thing in and of itself. And that's why I think the legend exists, that he's able to still be Kyrie Irving in that time frame. Now, the Mavericks are going to need even more, which is absurd to ask of him. He's 33, he has a bulging disc, and participating in Ramadan is only going to make it even more difficult for him. Not that he can't still perform to his level, it's just going to be a harder challenge for him. So who else can you lean on if you don't have AD? They now have Max Christie, who has emerged as one of the premier players for the Mavericks throughout all the injuries, somebody that they can rely on the defensive end and is able to create an offensive spark if needed. Now, in the 9 games that he's played this season with the Mavericks, Max Christie is averaging 14.7 points per game on 47.4% shooting overall, 44.2% from 3, 4.4 rebounds per game, 3.4 assists per game, and 1 steal per game. He started already in 3 of the 9 games played. And between February 6th and 23rd, he has a plus 19 clutch plus minus, which was tied for first in the NBA with Benedict Mathurin of Indiana. And just so that people understand, Mathurin played 2 clutch games, Max Christie played 5. So take that for what it's worth, maybe with a grain of salt. But Max Christie hasn't been a bad thing. When you look at the totality of the trade, yes, it's like you gave up Luka Dončić for Anthony Davis, who played 2.5 quarters, and Max Christie. But if you have already moved on and you're looking at the Mavericks right now, and you're saying, if you didn't have Luka, would you rather have Max Christie or not have Max Christie? And I think a lot of people have enjoyed watching Max Christie play and have seen his production and value his production, and are at least willing to let him ingratiate himself into the Mavericks offense and defense. Again, difficult situation for both him and AD to try to replace Luka, because it's not going to happen. But he is doing his best with the talents that he has. Now, where does AD fit in all of this? Right? Because he had a massive Dallas Mavericks debut. He looked unstoppable until he had to sit out in the third quarter. February 8th against the Rockets, he scored 26 points on 10 of 18 shooting, 55.6%, 2 of 2 from 3, 16 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 blocks. His 16 rebounds were the most rebounds in a Mavericks debut. He tied the second most points in a Mavericks debut at 26, and he tied the third most blocks in a Mavericks debut with 3. Again, this was Davis through 2.5 quarters. We didn't even get to see a full game with him. He could have possibly had the best Mavericks debut in history if he had been able to play 4 quarters, but that's not what we got. So if he were to return fully healthy and they were still able to make a postseason push, how could the Mavs use AD? He wants to be a true power forward. The Mavericks have experience with Dirk Nowitzki as a true power forward. Jason Kidd was the point guard feeding Dirk Nowitzki. Kyrie Irving plays a similar role in this offense with AD there. Can the Mavs use Anthony Davis like they used Dirk Nowitzki? Davis will have to be a prolific perimeter scorer along with his defensive capabilities on the floor in order for the Mavericks to even have a chance. And when he's hurt, they practically don't have a chance. But with all of those guys available, in the ideal world that all those guys are available, how the Mavericks use Dirk is probably a great framework for how they can use AD with all of his skill sets, the ability to score at all three levels. And then you add his defense on top of that. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA. That is a fact. So you put all those pieces together, then that's why people say the Mavericks have a shot with anybody, but you're going to need shot creation. How can you compete with the Celtics, the Cavaliers, or the Thunder if you don't have Luka Dončić, right? Because that's who you gave up to get Anthony Davis. So you don't necessarily have that shot creation, which is why you should probably funnel the offense through Anthony Davis so that you can create mismatches with double teams at the elbow. Then somebody's going to be available in the corners, on the wing for a three-point shot. And the Mavs are one of the best three-point shooting teams in the league as of the last 8 games. There's no doubt that they could continue a good level of three-point shooting as the season concludes. But if you only use defense to create offense, you're probably not going to get that far. And I would ask the Miami Heat, because that's kind of how their defense, or how their offense, I should say, was predicated. It was on whether or not they could force turnovers, at least over the last 2 seasons. Because Jimmy Butler could easily get any bucket that he wanted. He was a little more unselfish than people would like him to be, but most of their offense was predicated on their ability to force turnovers, especially in the postseason. And that can lead to a stagnant offense if you just can't force the turnover. So the Mavs are better equipped than the Heat were, but without Luka Dončić, without that superstar, that X factor is not going to be there. So, all that to say, there's still an elephant in the room. The Mavericks are in 9th place in the West. Here are the Western Conference standings through February 25th. In first place, Oklahoma City at 46-11. In second, Memphis is at 38-20, 8.5 games back. Tied with them in third is Denver at 38-20. Right behind them in fourth, the Los Angeles Lakers at 35-21, 10.5 games back. In fifth, the Houston Rockets are 36-22, 10.5 games back. In sixth, the LA Clippers, 31-26, 15 games back. Then the play-in teams start with Minnesota at 7th at 32-27 and 15 games back. In 8th, the Golden State Warriors are 31-27 with 15.5 games back. In 9th, the Dallas Mavericks at 31-28 and 16 games back. And in 10th, the Sacramento Kings at 29-28 and 17 games back. The next closest team in the hunt is the Phoenix Suns at 27-31, who are also going through their own struggles, and 19.5 games back. Then in 12th, the Portland Trailblazers are 25-33 and 21.5 games back. In 13th, the Spurs, who are now without Victor Wembanyama, are 24-32, 21.5 games back. In 14th, the New Orleans Pelicans are 15-43 at 31.5 games back. And in 15th, the Utah Jazz are 14-43, 32 games back. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, through February 25th, the Cleveland Cavaliers lead the way at 48-10, and they are the first team to clinch a postseason berth, which is top 10, so they will not miss the playoffs or the play-in. In second, the Boston Celtics at 42-16, only 6 games back. In third, the New York Knicks are 37-20, 10.5 games back. In fourth, the Indiana Pacers are 32-24, 15 games back. In fifth, the Milwaukee Bucks are 32-25, 15.5 games back. In sixth, the Detroit Pistons are 32-26, 16 games back. Then in the play-in tournament, In 7th, you have the Orlando Magic at 29-31, 20 games back. In 8th, you have the Atlanta Hawks at 27-31 and 21 games back. In 9th, the Miami Heat are 26-30, 21 games back. In 10th, the Chicago Bulls are 23-35, 25 games back. Then in the hunt, the Brooklyn Nets are 21-36, 26.5 games back. In 12th, the 76ers are 20-37. They still don't have Joel Embiid. They are 27.5 games back. In 13th, the Toronto Raptors are 18-40, 30 games back. In 14th, the Charlotte Hornets are 14-43 at 33.5 games back. And in 15th, the worst team in the NBA, the Washington Wizards, are 10-47 at 37.5 games back. Those are your conference standings. And again, it's not a foregone conclusion that the Mavericks could even stay in the play-in situation. So that's something that we're going to have to keep our eye on as we get through the back half of the season. Now let's transition to the top performers. Again, I got 3 of them. Big milestones and big games from young players coming up next. If you've made it this far, welcome to the postgame. I got 3 top performers for you, starting with Kevin Durant. February 11th versus Memphis, he reached the 30,000 career point milestone. Now, this list is through February 25th. Obviously, at the top of the list, you have LeBron James, who's still going, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. After those two, you have Karl Malone at 3rd with 36,928 points. 4th is Kobe Bryant with 33,643 points. 5th is Michael Jordan with 32,292 points. 6th is Dirk Nowitzki with 31,560 points. 7th is Wilt Chamberlain with 31,419 points. And in 8th, Kevin Durant at 30,135 career points in the regular season. My second top performer is a fellow Baylor Bear in Keontae George of the Utah Jazz. Saturday at home against the Rockets, he scored 30 points on 10 of 17 shooting, 58.8%, 5 of 8 from 3, 62.5%, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. This was his 5th career 30-point game, and he had a career-high 20 points in the first half. Now, that's a career high in the first half. He's had more in the second. But in the first half, 20 points is the most he has scored. So sick him, Keontae George. My third top performer is Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons. Sunday in Atlanta, he scored 38 points on 14 of 24 shooting, 7 of 10 from 3, 7 rebounds, 12 assists, a steal, and 3 blocks. His 7 threes made were a career high. He tied his 5th most points in his career, and he tied his 4th most blocks in his career. And that was a massive win that finished with a final score of 148-143. So shout out to those 3 guys for being the top performers in this episode. In the next episode, what am I going to talk about? Probably Luka Dončić and the Los Angeles Lakers, probably the Dallas Mavericks. But I also potentially want to talk about Detroit, New York, and see how these teams keep going as the season unfolds. Now I have the upcoming NBA schedule for you. On Thursday, February 27th, the Denver Nuggets will play the Milwaukee Bucks at 8 p.m. Eastern on TNT, True TV, and streaming on Max, followed by the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Los Angeles Lakers at 10:30 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV. Friday, February 28th, the Cleveland Cavaliers will visit the Boston Celtics at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, followed by the LA Clippers and the Los Angeles Lakers at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Saturday, March 1st, the Golden State Warriors will play the Philadelphia 76ers at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC. And then on Sunday, March 2nd, the Denver Nuggets will visit the Boston Celtics at 1 p.m. Eastern on ABC. So that does it for me. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate all of the reaction from the last episode. We're closing in on 100 subscribers, which is a milestone, and I appreciate all of you for sticking around with me this long. So make sure to download this episode, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Let's hit the rollout.